Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news. Today is Friday, May 10th, so 2024. Yeah, still in the year too. I do think I moved the docs around a little bit, so now I should be able to technically see the chat, although honestly, need to still move something. There we go. Let's move that. So yes, there was one person that did chat in the last stream. Again, apologies, as I'm just readjusting things here. As far as how my OBS layout is. Let's see. So do I even care to cover the notifications? There's a new selection pack. Now that I'm playing less, there's a new secret pack, and there's new accessories added. All of those I can afford right now, or at least most of those I can afford right now, but I do question, with playing minimal Yu-Gi-Oh! Here as just a warm-up, I don't know if I am going to run out of gems. It might very well just be a case where I need to not purchase new card packs as often. Let's see. We have one free pull we can go ahead and do, and I think that might be all we want to do. 2 new cards. How Dark Dimension Warrior Lady is a new card is extremely questionable, since this should be a really old card, unless I'm confusing it with a different Dark Dimension card. But yeah, seems like there's still just a kind of high number. If we look at the featured cards and we look at what is available, it is more of this sushi ships concept. And let's see. Don't have full 3 copies of every normal, and I'm missing some rares. So it would make sense, I think, to at least buy a 10 pack, and then what I think we would want to do here is, if I managed to not get even one ultra rare or super rare, do another 10 pack at that point. But I think 20 packs at most are what I'm going to be able to afford going to expansions now. And I also think we're probably going to heavily give up on a lot of the events much quicker. I may just show off the events in 3 games and then go back to playing ranked and just focus on staying in ranked. Or go the other direction and heavily focus on the events and not play ranked. I had an occasion to look at chess.com, which I haven't done anything with chess.com since 2011, I believe. I had a friend who wanted to play chess with me. We played maybe 16 games, and then I think he got bored of me because I was such a terrible chess player, and I still am. The app looks great as it did in 2011. Doesn't look like it's changed much. Maybe there's some more premium advertisement in the app, but also noticeably something screwed up there, and I can't log into my old account. Not that it really matters. But yeah, I still may be wrong about this, but I'm still of the opinion that chess.com is the way to play chess between friends online. Why did all the new just disappear there? Let's see. Yeah, chess.com has some physical chessboards that also connect to their service. And on a broader thought on this subject that barely is connected to video games, chess digitally is a video game, yes, but it is just a simulation of a board game that has existed for a very long time. But yeah, chess.com on a broader scope is a great example of what a democratized internet should have been, where you would have a website that was literally just called chess.com and it literally was just about chess. Compare that to Amazon.com, which is not about the Amazon at all in any ways, and is instead just a pun of having more trees in it in the form of books than the Amazon rainforest, which is not even what Amazon.com is anymore. It's hardly a bookstore, it's now a mega superstore. Or you have Google.com, which once was just a search website, now is very much an ad site with a bunch of other things integrated into it, masquerading as a search website. But yeah, as far as the catch-up section, I managed to play a couple episodes. I could have probably played 3 episodes instead of 2 had I just made shorter episodes, but I played 2 like 2-hour episodes of Fallout New Vegas, and the most recent one I found much more appealing in the experience because I accomplished a lot more. Was able to start quests, end quests, start other quests. I am very much doing quests on top of each other in a bad way. I really wish it was much more of a linear experience where you would get one quest and that would probably stop you from even starting other quests. If the character said, it looks like you've got a lot on your plate right now, come back to me once you finish this current quest and I may have some more work for you. If it was more like that, that would be great. Because Bethesda games, Fallout games in particular, do sometimes feel like you're just trying to start as many quests as possible, not really paying attention to any of the narrative or the storytelling. You're just trying to see how many different things can you accomplish if you fast travel to a location to turn in quests, and then fast travel to another location to turn in some more quests. I think I've probably jumped up a level or 2 rather fast in the last 2 episodes, simply because I'm just turning in a bunch of quests. There is quite a lot of different factions with communities in Fallout New Vegas compared to Skyrim, I would say, where it feels like there was really only like 2 factions in Skyrim, and then there was several groups, is what you'd call them. Like the assassins wouldn't really be in a faction in the war. It was really just the East and the West in the war. And Fallout New Vegas kind of has that with the Legion and the NCR at war, but it feels like it is more around the design of a full-on multiple faction war, where at least 3 factions will be at war with each other, if not 4 or 5. Let's see. How much can we accomplish in one turn? It also feels like in Fallout New Vegas in particular, you want to evolve your relationship as much as possible with the companions. So then you can get the companions quests and then finish the companions quests and then get rid of that one companion to go to another companion to get their companion quests. And I don't know if that is the same as what it would have been in Skyrim or Fallout 3. In Fallout 3 I never really chose a different companion, so it is very possible I just played the game completely wrong. I'm going to take all the steps here so we can swap out things. And there was a vault that I did that was very vertical, in vertical design in Fallout New Vegas, or any Fallout game. It's not going to work particularly well. And there's a real imbalance on just how that specific vault felt like it was supposed to be spooky and scary, but it was placed in an area where you would have had to have been way overpowered compared to the enemies, and so there's just no challenge there, and yet to get to the area was a challenge, so it just doesn't feel balanced. Generally, I just don't think Bethesda games or Fallout games are designed well enough that you could say there's some deadly wildlife around the vault, but once you get into the vault, it's going to be 3 times easier. I'm at level 20 of the main game without the DLC expansion. I think level 50 is the max level you could reach, and at this rate it definitely does feel to me that by the time I'm at level max 50 I may have my specials stats at a full 10-10-10 on every single of the strength, perception, endurance, agility, intelligence, and luck. It may just be a full 10 across the board, and every skill, which is somewhat affected by your special stats, may be at a full 100 for every single skill after that. But I probably won't have a whole bunch of interesting perks, and so it's still, even if you were just maxed out, it still feels like a new game plus concept, whether through a mod or just in default being in Fallout New Vegas, would make a lot of sense. Yeah. Effectively, it feels like you need to play Fallout New Vegas for several hours before you realize you're playing it wrong and start the whole game over again. And that's not really what I would suggest or encourage, but yeah. It feels like there's a lot more named characters that I should be able to go up to and talk to that are just actively hostile to me, in part because I think sometimes I was wearing the NCR's faction armor, and so they were just assuming I was an NCR trooper and attacking me on sight. But I guess that's all I have to say as far as the catch-up section, because I'm really not doing anything else. I finished that Korean drama on Amazon Prime called Death's Game. It went in a direction that I kind of saw coming, but also just doesn't feel like it had as good of a connection as it should have. there is a small possibility if I watch the entire series again, knowing the twist at the end, you might have some more perspective there. Inherently, since the desk game TV show is based on a Korean webtoon, there probably was a much higher opportunity there to go and reread the webtoons week after week and figure out what is potentially going to happen or how things are going to potentially be connected. Effectively, just everything is connected in it, and that's a little much. And there's the overall theme, I think, also would resonate a lot more with Korean people more than it would United States people. Then I may have started watching something else. Yeah, I started watching Clarkson's Farm, season 3's back half of those episodes. But there's really nothing to say there. I think I've mostly been sleeping in between the times I've been recording things. I did see that a new SteamOS update has been pushed to the beta channel, so next time I turn on my Steam Deck, it'll update. The biggest thing people seem to be talking about is that the official Steam Dock, at least, is going to have the HDMI CEC commands, which would mean, I assume, if you press volume up or volume down on a TV remote that a Steam Deck is docked and plugged into, the volume up and volume down will go up and down. I don't know what other buttons could really be mapped to something on the Steam Deck, and it doesn't make a lot of sense that your Steam Deck would go the other direction and pressing volume up or volume down on the Steam Deck when it's docked would turn up the volume on the TV. They also added Bluetooth A2DP profiles, so better Bluetooth headphone audio profiles could be used, better AirPods connecting. So it does seem like they've updated some things, although perhaps not really touched on any of the things I've suggested as far as being updated. But yeah. So they need to rapidly overdevelop the SteamOS to make it make sense and work for more and more people, and show that they are still interested in it and still developing for it. Well, that didn't work. The only thing I could really do here is see if we can, I guess, get to a 4-cost character. I am starting earlier today, in part because a appointment got canceled, in part just because the appointment was earlier. And that gave me the opportunity to go to a restaurant and eat far too much pizza. And so I'm feeling like I'm probably having a little bit of a reactive blood sugar moment. I don't think I have diabetes or anything like that, but if you do eat a lot of carbs, a lot of sugar, I drank a ton of sweet lemonade too. But yeah, I feel just a little dull right now. I think I did the wrong thing here. I saw an interesting video on YouTube from Ask This Old House. Again, this is not video game related. I'm just trying to warm up here and I'm doing a terrible job at it. Where they have a air to water heat pump they were showing off. And what was unique about the air to water heat pump is that it was heating the hot water on top of creating hot and cold air conditioning. So it was doing three things at once, and it was more of an all-in-one unit that was going to be easier on the install time. And for this house, which is probably up in the New England area of the United States where it can snow and you can get snowed in, and for that specific house, which I assume had a propane tank with only one provider, so you couldn't shop around, and so it was effectively a monopoly, they were estimating that it was going to save the homeowner roughly $2,000 every year, because he was paying about $3,000 every year to, I assume, have propane shipped in and put into a tank on their property. Now, your mileage is going to vary drastically in those situations based on the location. And New England area, when it snows, the roads would get frozen over, so if you ran out of heating, you can be in a really bad position there because you're not going to get any more propane. But yeah. It's an interesting unit, an interesting comparison. If you are connected to natural gas or propane via the city, you're likely to pay severely less, and that gives you a secondary source of energy. And generally, I do recommend having two sources of energy, not just like electricity. And I wouldn't really count solar as a secondary source of energy. So while there is a heavy push for good health reasons to get rid of natural gas and propane in houses, it's really putting all your eggs in one basket as far as electricity, when the only way that would make sense is if there were different ways you could deliver electricity, different electrical wires and grids, like a buried grid and a on the pole grid, or wireless energy, or if you could generate a more than sufficient amount of solar power or wind power on your own, or if you could even just have a generator, a hydro generator, connected to city water supply, which that wouldn't work either. That would waste a ton of water. Honestly, if we could shrink nuclear power generators into each house, that would probably be your best bet. If you just had a foolproof, idiot-proof Fallout style nuclear generator powering every single house, separate, no grid needed, that'd be great. And yeah, for emergencies you have little generators that you can just pour gasoline or diesel into, but they're not efficient enough to power a full house or power even the necessities for a long amount of time. So it seems 25 minutes into the stream, I'm probably not going to get any more warmed up than we already are. So let's see if maybe just starting to talk about video game news itself will get me more energetic. Sorry. GameDeveloper.com says that Nintendo is killing X/Twitter integration for the Switch in June. There has been, by Linus Tech Tips in particular, a continuing discussion on just how much unrequested porn is on Twitter. I think Instagram might also be a source of that, or that there might be a couple of sites that are just really unfettered nudity. And is it appropriate for a boss to say, you're supposed to be our social media manager, so you have to go to Twitter or Tumblr, which means just in the comments you're going to see nudity that's unwanted and unrequested. And certainly that underlying feeling may have played a role in Nintendo shutting down this, but the stated reason, and the much more obvious reason, is to just follow the money. And it is a case that the API access pricing is way too much, $42,000 per month. Microsoft and Sony have also done away with Twitter and X integration. And yeah, I don't think at this point there's any reason to believe that Twitter is going to get turned around, and it seems more likely the case that Tesla and the SpaceX website services are going to fall apart and get shut down, and then Twitter will still just be under control of its current owner. Yep. Which I can't even remember his name at the moment. So yeah. That all being said, I'm still in the exact same position I was in the last stream, which is I don't know where other people are going. I suspect that Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo still are going to post as much as they always did on Twitter. They're just not integrating it into the consoles, which is probably a good idea anyways. I'd say social media sites should not be integrated into consoles, even though the sharing mentality was a nice mentality. I think if you really were to take a step back, sharing has been mostly a failure. People are irritated by sharing. I overshare way too much. People just don't want to see what their friends want to show them, and that may have been true even before computers were invented. And unfortunately, people are much more susceptible to seeing things that algorithms are trying to show them, whether that's Facebook or YouTube or some other algorithm. So yeah, as far as gamers sharing clips of their gameplay, if you're not going full OBS, if you're not recording it completely, then I just don't I don't think it's worth the effort to even share little clips or things like that. And I also think Microsoft is taking away free storage from clips and making you put it in your OneDrive to count against your quota on OneDrive. As far as clips goes, I think I heard that. I had a comment on one of my videos, which probably was an advertisement for some service, or maybe a scam, who knows, where they said, "Great video, you should let me be your editor and make you some thumbnails," which is exactly what I wanted to hear. But let me point out why this pitch did not reach its intended goal. I clicked on the person's profile and they have absolutely 0 videos on YouTube. So if you're going to even begin to suggest, let me be your editor, let me be your thumbnail creator, 2 fairly separate things. I can imagine somebody actually could do both, but I could also imagine a lot of people are only going to be good at one or the other. But if you're going to make that suggestion, first of all, you need a portfolio on your own personal YouTube. Otherwise, nobody has any reason to take you seriously. The second problem with that is that even if I had reached out to this person, all I could really tell them is, you're going to get no credit and you're going to get no pay. So, yeah, do you still want to work for free on somebody's website that has over 10,000 videos, which I would like to have 10,000 thumbnails on all those videos? But yeah, do you really want to work for free for getting no pay and no credit? Because that would be the starting position, certainly. If somebody was with me for a fairly long amount of time, I might start crediting them, but I have to really consider that as a small YouTuber who's making absolutely nothing on their YouTube channel, because so many instances has an editor or an assistant or an employee been brought in, and then that person turns out to be a creep, and then there's just this creep asterisk to your history where somebody has plagiarized something, or somebody has sexually harassed somebody, or somebody has physically assaulted somebody, and I just don't want that extra drama associated with my YouTube channel, my brand. And then certainly there's been cases where there hasn't been drama, but then an editor is doing the work, maybe even getting paid, but then all of a sudden they want their name and exposure, more exposure on my videos. And I do think people should be credited, but also I would enter into that realm very carefully. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of issues there that I'd have to consider, and I wouldn't really feel good about exploiting people. That's a major issue too, because it's not just, can I get lucky and have somebody work for free or work for an acceptable amount of exposure that I would be able to accept. It's, can I feel good and sleep good at night knowing that I'm effectively exploiting somebody? Yeah, and I'd prefer by far to have my YouTube channel monetized, have kind of a consistent few dollars coming in here and there, and then be able to pay somebody from that consistent level. So Bethesda Game Studios had recently, through Microsoft, laid off a bunch of people. 4 hours ago they said they're going to be updating Fallout 4 again, new options for graphics and performance setting, as well as further fixes and improvements. And seems like they are completely silent around all the layoffs. which I guess that is one way to do it, certainly. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is updating to add a free Chaos and Versus modes, which gets back to the argument that we are not at the point yet where the where it would be the right time to still play Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Lightforge Games is laying off the majority of its development team. The studio said it struggled to secure funding for its debut project and is now pausing development. So there is a question certainly here as far as, is it as big of a loss if a company that's never really even released anything is failing before they even release a game? Is it as big of a loss to society, to the community? It's probably the exact same loss for the employees. This was a fully remote studio formed in 2021 by a group of Blizzard and Epic Game veterans. I think part of the problem with a lot of these studios is that they hire a bunch of veterans of other places who either aren't worth their paycheck or just aren't that good at making games. And then a lot of these companies try to sell themselves on the fact that somebody once worked somewhere else. It's kind of like saying you work for a Fortune 500 company because you worked for McDonald's. I imagine McDonald's corporate is a Fortune 500 company. Is it honest? Is it being fully honest if you put on a resume that you worked for a Fortune 500 company because you were a burger flipper at a franchise of McDonald's? Not really. Should you be fully honest on a resume? Absolutely not. You'll never get hired at that rate. First thing you're supposed to learn when applying for a job is how to be dishonest, bend the rules, and potentially even break the law, because that's exactly what employers are going to ask you to do. In a lot of cases, at least. So yeah, this was Project Orcs, I guess. But yeah, I don't think they had even gotten far enough to get people really hyped about it. I don't even remember seeing this concept art. EA is talking about adding in-game ads, and here you have GameDeveloper.com posing a headline question here: why does EA think in-game ads are better business than a Mandalorian game? Which inherently I have to assume EA is just looking for consistent, easy money and not willing to take risks. Which, in fairness, a Mandalorian game does carry a risk in that the Mandalorian could fall out of popularity. He could be replaced with other Star Wars content that's more fresh and new and interesting, or they could release a terrible season of The Mandalorian and ruin the ending or ruin the fandom. Plus, EA has to license The Mandalorian from Disney, who's probably overcharging, whereas just selling ads in games. Unfortunately, it is very much the snake eating its own tail situation, in that the EA games that people are playing are games like Madden, which have already trained the player base of people who are playing Madden to accept lower quality content and worse games. So just making the games a little worse even more by adding ads is going to probably work for the audience EA has sought out and gained. EA really sliding from being a AAA video game, console game developer, or PC game developer, into being a slightly better polished mobile game developer, falling into the exact same patterns you see for mobile games, which are heavily advertised, have in-game ads and in-game purchases. Most mobile games tend not to have, well, I can't say most. I'd say the good mobile games that I've played tend not have ads that are random. They tend to be at least ads for other games or ads for in-game purchases in the actual game you're playing. The best ones are ads for in-game purchases in the game you're playing. And it certainly does concern me that if we start to have ads in games, it's really not going to be very long before we start to have political or politicized ads in games. And I don't think it's going to benefit anybody if all of a sudden you're in the middle of a game of Madden and a Donald Trump ad pops up or a Joe Biden ad pops up. Like, nobody is going to benefit from that at all. Moving on, CI Games sanctions another 30 layoffs in a final targeted round of redundancy. I don't know why they phrase it this way as far as sanctioning another 30 layoffs instead of just saying we've approved 30 layoffs or lays off plans to lay off 30 people. The Lords of the Fall developer just amassed $60 million in its annual revenue to achieve its best year on record. Yeah. Certainly when you see stories like this and headlines like this, it becomes more apparent in my mind that a significant amount of these layoffs are really just follow the leader type layoffs. They see other video games companies laying off people, so they're laying off people also. This makes unionization less likely to happen, and the companies know it, and it also just gives every company cover to say, well, everybody else was doing it, so you can't yell at us individually. Meanwhile, they're lowering the average salary with every layoff, because even if they end up hiring new people, they'll hire them at a lower pay rate. The Communication Workers of America has asked Microsoft in a probably public statement, where's the respect and compassion following the studio's closure? So, I also saw, not video game related, that some country has passed a law limiting unionization strike links, which there's no such thing as a successful strike if it has a legally enforceable end date. Down to, it's like 1 week if it's a political strike and 2 weeks if it's a industrial strike. So ridiculous short amount of time, and I think you'd very quickly see people on strike ignoring those laws, and you might very well see the police not arresting anybody from that, since police tend to be heavily union, although police unions also seem to very often not support other unions and not have the kind of solidarity that they should have. I believe the CWA did manage to unionize a small group of Activision Blizzard employees, and so we're not seeing what seems like direct layoffs for those employees, but Microsoft has certainly laid off other people, although I'm not 100% sure that they didn't put more thought into it than people seem to think, and the outraged people seem to be saying. And I have to admit personally, when I see a lot of mainstream video game journalists who I know are nepotistic and too friendly with game developers being outraged, I kind of want to side with the corporations and the management in that case, because I have a distaste for mainstream video game journalists and all the shenanigans they've pulled. But I would definitely prefer to stay on the side of the worker, even if I do believe that a lot of the workers in the game industry might be bad workers, bad game developers, or just overall bad people, in my opinion. But yeah, there is also talk, and we'll talk about this later, about how Microsoft said they needed smaller games and cheaper budget games, and people are saying that Hi-Fi Rush would have fit that bill, but they shut down Tango Gameworks. Well, the definition of smaller and small budget is very flexible, and it may very well be the case that Microsoft is looking for games that are single A instead of even being double A games, or maybe even B, C, or D games if you want to use those terms or invent those terms. Really small budgets and small team games where it's 2-3 people working on less than $10 million or $1 million to make a game. Yeah. CWA, being a union, says this highlights the need for game developers to organize or unionize, and it's pretty obvious that they're right on that case. There would have been a slower process, more negotiation, more pushback, more protection if game developers were unionized. Although, in this specific case, it's worth pointing out, Arcane Austin is in Austin, Texas. Austin is a very liberal city, but Texas is a super anti-union, conservative Republican state. So Texas is in a right-to-work state, so unionization and union shops can't exist, and you can't be forced to join a union to work a job, which weakens the unions because then they get less dues and have to struggle. Unions do exist in Japan as far as Tango Gameworks, and yet it seems like there really wasn't a union that really cared that all of Tango Gameworks is being shut down. And inherently, if you're shutting down the entire business anyways, unions don't have much they can do there, because going on strike to disrupt business in a office that is already being shut down doesn't stop anything. You would have to get unions at other Microsoft subsidiaries to go on strike in solidarity for Arcane Austin or Tango Gameworks being shut down, and that is less likely to happen. Yeah, unionizations in general won't stop an entire company from being shut down. And it definitely feels like the 4 companies they picked are all kind of remote locations from Redmond, Washington, where Microsoft is. Somebody else also made a reasonable statement to make as far as the amount that Microsoft paid for the Activision Blizzard CEO, Bobby Kotick, could have paid to keep Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks open for a very long time. And I always suspected that the Activision Blizzard acquisition was in major part being done as a form of cronyism to get money into Bobby Kotick's hands, and it doesn't feel like it's even really benefited Microsoft at all. It seems like it's just one rich person laundering money to another. I thought they might have actually kept Bobby Kotick for his political connections and for lobbying reasons, but no, he announced he was leaving before they even acquired Activision Blizzard, and I believe is fully out of the picture. Although in fairness, who knows if he didn't write up the plans to, well, he probably didn't write up the plans for Microsoft to shut down non-Activision Blizzard companies to afford the other companies they've just acquired. It's also very possible Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin just didn't have good game pitches. Like, they didn't have good ideas for the next game they were going to work on. So, can you really keep somebody employed, an entire business running for a quarter, half a year, a full year, or longer when they have no idea what they should be working on and no good ideas as far as new games to make? Particularly, I don't think Microsoft is utilizing its companies well enough, because undoubtedly you could have Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks just work on level designs and map designs for the next Call of Duty if you wanted to, although maybe they refused to do that, and that's why they got shut down. There's a lot of speculation you can make with no real evidence. Let's see. The Marathon trilogy, which apparently are older games, is coming to Steam from Bungie, and the first game is free right now. So, 1994 to 1996. So yeah, we'll have to find that and grab that. Capcom has hit new records for sales and profits in its 2023-2024 financials. Dragon's Dogma 2, Street Fighter 6, and plenty of other things under Capcom, such as Resident Evil 4 Remake, all contributed to those sales. Capcom does seem like it is the one company we can point to, and there's probably others, that have done fairly well financially in the past few years, just making games, just kind of sticking to what they were doing. I don't think we've heard Capcom talk about AI. I don't think we've heard about them trying to add games as a service to anything. They've just stuck to making good games, and it's worked for them. So if there was ever a pattern to try and follow, it would be Capcom. Although, in fairness, part of Capcom's pattern would be very successful and release one of the best, most sold games in Resident Evil 4 for decades prior. Now, Gamatsu, we recently saw that GameDeveloper.com had its 1-year anniversary. Gamatsu, in contrast, is on its 16th anniversary today. So, yeah, quite a difference there. And notably, as far as comments, let's see, Gamatsu said congratulations to GameDeveloper.com, and I don't think they returned the favor. In fact, I don't see too many people that look like they are other kinds of mainstream video game journalist sites at all commenting. More retweeting. And this was 5 hours ago. Now, I can't help but be suspicious if this isn't the case of mainstream video game journalists giving the cold shoulder to this guy in, I believe, New York, the one guy who runs Gamatsu and does a very good job at it, Sal Romano, just because Gamatsu is much more Japanese focused in its press releases and video games than it is talking about They describe themselves as Japanese plus Western video game news, whereas Video Games Chronicle is Western video game news with a focus around UK, because they're based, although they're actually based officially out of San Francisco, weirdly, but they seem like they're more based out of the UK. And yeah, not seeing any other news sources retweeting that. Let's see. Here we have GameDeveloper.com saying Fallout 4 was April's best-selling game in the UK, which, okay. That perhaps is a element against Stellar Blade. That is a jab against Stellar Blade, but then there really wouldn't be anything else that would be that big of a deal. I wish they had a better chart here. Helldivers 2. So yeah, it was Fallout 4, then EA Sports Football Club 2024, and Helldivers 2, which I guess was 3. New Vegas was in 8th space, and Fallout 76 was in 9th, which highlights that New Vegas seems to be way more popular in the UK compared to overall in the world, where Fallout 76 is getting played a lot more overall on Steam. Microsoft is launching a web-based mobile game storefront in July. The marketplace will initially house first-party titles, but external partners could be ushered in shortly after. So, the EU has told Apple that they have to allow third-party stores, and Microsoft definitely wants to give that a try as far as a third-party store, in particular because of Game Pass. Looking at this mock-up, you see they're advertising also streaming services on top of games. So, and here's some movies and TVs for rent or on-demand purchase, so that they aren't just focusing on games. There is certainly a question as to why you would use this store if you have already kind of purchased anything ever from like the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, which are much more established and we know will be around. The Microsoft Store might be abandoned in a couple years, so I wouldn't really purchase anything there. But if you had Xbox Game Pass, and then this was the way Xbox Game Pass gave you some more value, I could see people using it that way, and I expect that's what's going to happen, is Xbox Game Pass Ultimate will either give you subscriptions at a discount to streaming stuff, or it will give you free games. It probably will give you free games to start with. The Rogue Prince of Persia, apparently, according to Video Games Chronicle, has been delayed because of the Hades 2 early access release. Let's see, that is at least what the studio is saying. I would suspect the Rogue Prince of Persia also just needs a little bit more work. Switch 2 tech specs may have been found in customs and shipping data. If these are rumors, which is what they are, if these rumors are true, then the amount of RAM and memory will be significantly higher than those of the original Switch, which undoubtedly, no duh, it needs to have way more memory and RAM. Memory maybe not as much, but RAM for sure. And if you're still limited on your CPU and GPU, RAM and memory is not going to fix all the issues. Let's see. One listing is for a 6GB RAM chip, which we really are more in the realm of wanting 8GB for our gaming processor, which they're going to double up on to give you 12 gigabytes in total, which is a good amount, but it might be being shared with your GPU, so it may very well get you back down to 6 gigabytes or even less than 6 gigabytes for what you're using for video RAM, and then the remainder for CPU RAM. And it's unclear if this is going to be low profile DDR5, which would be pretty fast, or DDR5X, which is faster, but it's reportedly going to run at speeds of 7,500 million transfers per second, which that is a fairly fast RAM speed. The original Switch has only 4 gigabytes of low profile DDR4 RAM, which runs at 3,200 million transfers per second. Those specs alone, though, can't convince me that the Switch 2, if it did have this speed and that amount of RAM, that alone can't convince me the games will run better or even still be on the same level as a Series X or PlayStation 5. Another listing suggests the Switch's built-in storage will be 256 gigabytes and using I think that's Unified File System 3.1, which reads speeds only up to 2,100 megabytes per second, which is compared to the 32 gigs storage on the Switch, which peaks only at 300 megabytes per second. The speed here, I think, can be compared directly to this, if that is correct. And so what this tells me is that when you're going to load something off storage, it is going to be roughly a third as slow as when you are running something directly out of RAM, which inherently means that there will be situations where you're loading in a texture from the storage, from the internal storage, and it's going to slow down the RAM by a third during those loading sections. So you may very well have noticeable, very slow, very long loading sections still, particularly as more games will try and use these speeds to just load bigger textures and higher resolution textures, which is what people want, but you don't also want a bunch of loading. One thing the Switch has done really good, at least for first party games, is to hide all of its loading and not really have a lot of it going on. But the fact that you don't know whether it's going to be NVIDIA or ARM CPU and how many millions of transfers per second on the CPU, you don't have a clear picture as far as what the performance is. And most people are not interested in the internals if you can get the game to actually run and look good. People will first be oohed and awed by the exterior of the Switch, which we've heard no rumors about that really, other than they may have magnets holding the new Joy-Cons, which will be bigger on the Switch 2. I'm still not 100% sold that it isn't just going to be a Switch extra large that designed for more adults. Let's see. Here we have the Xbox president saying studio closures will ensure business is healthy for a long term. We look to a whole variety of factors when we're faced with making decisions and trade-offs like that. This would be the Xbox president, Sarah Bond, who seems not to really speak too much, but has apparently gone to a Bloomberg Live interview. This may be her first decision that really was her decision. Yep. Regardless of whether I agree with the decisions to shut down studios, I can't help but admit that I am kind of happy to see the upper management at Microsoft doing anything at all. They really have just been way too hands off, and that if they stayed like that, it'll always just be a mess. We'll never have a consistent experience with Microsoft as far as a publisher or as a game developer. Some of their subsidiaries may make games really well in a timely manner. Other companies may not do anything at all, and for decades. It has been rumored that God of War Ragnarok is going to be announced for PC imminently. PlayStation Showcase is happening this month. It's also been claimed. That is believable, certainly. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't put Ragnarok on PC eventually, considering they put the first God of War on PC. This is a little less believable in my book, but apparently they're considering a global release for Persona 5 The Phantom X, which would be yet another extension spin-off of Persona 5. This is a mobile PC spin-off, so I assume it's probably more of a mobile game, and in that aspect a worldwide release at the same time does make some sense. Yeah, I definitely have played some mobile games that lagged behind in the English/global versions compared to the Korean versions or the Japanese versions, which were a year ahead or 2 years ahead. And that just never feels fun, because you create this situation where people are getting hyped about things that won't come out for a year or two because they can see what's in the Japanese version or the Korean version of the game, instead of being focused on what the global version has to offer now. Let's see. So SteamOS has been version 3.6 has been pushed to the preview channel. The update includes a very long list of quality of life improvements and an equally long list of under the hood updates. We have a patch notes here. We can see. Should have clicked on it. They subtitled this remote controlled, updated to a more recent base of Arch Linux, improved experience for AirPods, and upgraded to the Linux kernel version 6.5. So these are Linux-wise pretty big things. Fixed some connectivity failures with access points supporting WPA3 security. That probably was the bug I ran into when I first turned on my Steam Deck and couldn't connect to my router, because my router does support WPA3. Improved speed of subsequent OS updates, which the only way that could possibly be the case is that they've found a way to break the operating systems up into smaller bits and only update the parts that really need to change. A lot of micro SD issues, cursor offset alignment issues. I haven't seen that one, but I haven't really done much with my Steam Deck. Let's see. Flat pack, Bluetooth A2DP and BAP. I don't even know what the BAP profile is. I haven't heard of that one. Improved speed on Bluetooth devices, stability in memory pressure situations, performance overlays, And then added mechanisms to configure Bluetooth device categories are allowed to wake the system from suspend. So now some Bluetooth devices can straight up wake up the Steam Deck. Yeah. And then some display improvements overall, updating the desktop mode to KDE Plasma 5.27.10, which is still not version 6, which would be the major change. I think that will happen pretty quickly. They're enabling thumbnail previews for videos in the file browser by default, or SD things. So the deck dock will have HDMI CEC features for a TV remote input, TV wake up, and TV input switching, which means when you turn on the TV, it should wake up the Steam Deck. When you switch to the Steam Deck's HDMI source, it should turn it on. And remote input should mean when you press the TV's remote up and down on the volume should go up and down. Now, if you pressed up and down on the channels, I imagine nothing would happen. And I don't think any of the other buttons, except for mute, would probably do anything else either. HDMI CEC is supposed to just work, and it doesn't even work in its current state without being able to be customized. But it really should have more customized things. This uniquely makes an argument that if you are going to buy a Steam Deck dock, you should buy the official Valve one, because there is a firmware on it and they've updated that for high refresh VRR displays, and clearly Steam and Valve are only going to work on the official dock connectivity. Let's see, overclock controls and display controls, and some more technical things. So yeah, some major updates there. Unfortunately, it's time for a break again, so I'm gonna pause the recording and be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, Steam Deck update. I believe the last update that was to happen from the Steam OS was somewhere in maybe March, maybe February. So not a super long amount of time. Now, if you were the kind of people who like their Linux kernel and their Linux versions to be updated constantly, you probably wouldn't be going with SteamOS and Arch Linux in that case anyways. But yeah, your mileage will vary. Definitely if you just wanted updates to the operating system every single month. But most people don't want that. And I would say SteamOS updates probably still way less irritating than, say, Windows updates. So we have some more information from the Lollipop Chainsaw Repop that has been translated. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop is going to feature 480 costume variants, which would be 30 costumes and 4 new chainsaws with hairs and color. So you are getting to that number in kind of a roundabout way, with the addition of 4 new hair colors, which and 4 new chainsaws. I guess that gets you up to 5 and 5 in total. That's 10 times 30 still would only get you to 300, so I'm not sure where they're getting the other 180 number from. But yeah, a lot of these costumes will probably not be safe for work, or storyline wise make a lot of sense. And only having 4 hairstyles in a remake of an old game is a little weird, but also it's a little weird to have any new hairstyles or new chainsaw weapons in the remake of the old game. And increasingly now, Repop feels like it is a remake of the old game and not just a remaster of the old game, which there was some slight concern there, and there definitely was some concern too that there was some talk that it was just going to be a full-on reboot and or sequel. And I would say at this point, I'm not sure Stellar Blade's numbers are ever going to get posted or talked about, so I doubt you're going to be able to make a one-for-one connection between Stellar Blade being released and being received somewhat well for a brief moment there before all of the controversy and Lollipop Chainsaw coming out. The only thing really to be concerned about here is who are going to be the publisher for Lollipop Chainsaw, and if they're going to self-publish, what platforms would they self-publish on? Yeah. All the hairstyles in these concept arts are the same. She has different hair colors. Maybe that hairstyle is just a ponytail while everything else is twin tails. And then she has these like big donut-like hair scrunchies. Let's see. Cyan is promoting their Riven remake, and there was something big about it, that they had been inducted into the Strong's World Video Game Hall of Fame. Yeah, the World Video Game Hall of Fame, which is not something I've really heard of before or paid a lot of attention. This would be the Strong National Museum of Play. Where is this even located? Let's get that information. There was certainly one group of people that were inducting video games, and it was very weird, certainly, and you get the same thing here in that you have a 1978 game, you have Myst, you have Resident Evil 1 PlayStation game, and then you have SimCity for PC, and Ultima, and all inducted games seems to only be 9 games, of which 5 of them were inducted today. So, and that's the problem pretty much with any video game museum. This is in New York City, which, yeah, that makes sense. The Strong Museum in New York City. Yeah. Definitely seems like they're doing a new thing here as far as games they want to induct, because so far let's see, view all inducted games. I guess we'll click here and see if we get a longer list. No, that's funny. Seems to me like you would have a much better system to do all of this than having to check every single box. So in total, if you filter it or unfilter it, you can see there's 45 games that have been inducted all over the place. It's inherently, I think you're just too close to the case that every single old game has some relevancy, or almost every single old game has some relevancy. So almost every single game should be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and thus you really shouldn't even call it the Hall of Fame. It should just be the Chronicles of Video Games, really. I think I have one of those in my Nintendo collection. Rare Game & Watch sequels. Wasn't a Game & Watch, but it was a tabletop toy. But yeah, and I believe only 4 or 5 of the Pong cabinets were ever built. Anyways, I could probably say something about a lot of these inductees. But yeah, if I was going to run a museum, I think you kind of have to say, you know what, we're just going to have to pick from 1975, maybe even earlier, to somewhere around 2000, and we're going to just have to pick a single game to induct every year from every single one of those years, and probably not even stop at 2000, just go up to like 2024, and just keep on doing that every year, just for every single year induct something. But even that would be fairly slow. It would probably make more sense to just say we're going to induct everything from 1990 and earlier into our chronicles, into our list, because almost every single game there has some relevancy, which probably speaks to how I wouldn't be the right candidate to run a Hall of Fame for video games. I would be much better of a candidate to run something like Giant Bomb's database for video games, to just have everything there, because that's always my default way of thinking, and I think it's a decent way of thinking, frankly, is that once you start to work on a massive scale, once you have 100, 1,000, 10,000 of something that you need to sort through, it's just easier because words are cheap, or if you're dealing with files on a computer, storage space is relatively cheap usually. It's just easier to have everything in the list and just make a complete collection instead of trying to curate things. You will kill yourself agonizing over curation. Even in the case of Myst, which brought us to this page. Should Riven be inducted? Probably. Should Myst 3 Exile be inducted? Probably not, but it is relevant. People should know it exists. Should Myst 4 be inducted? Probably not. Should Myst 5 be inducted? Not really. But yeah, because Myst 1 is relevant, any of its sequels become more relevant. And a museum of play, as far as inducting video games, really can't do too much. They can run emulators and run the risk of somebody like Nintendo suing them for running emulators to play these games on like Raspberry Pis, which, in fairness, all of these old games would probably run perfectly on a Raspberry Pi, but that's about all you can do. Most kids who are brought to a museum would not be encouraged by their parents to sit in front of a TV and a Raspberry Pi and just play all of Myst, which would take too long. All of these games, and this is where libraries need to have digital collections, take so long that you need to be able to rent out the games digitally to play them and experience the full experience. In the same way that reading a book takes so long, you need to be able to rent out a book from a library. Yes, there is a small number of people who could probably sit in a library and read an entire book from beginning to end, but most people don't have that kind of free time or that kind of reading speed. So yeah, it is more important by far to have have libraries, have digital collections of games, than it is to have a Hall of Fame set up for video games, put in the museums, just behind glass being shown off. Moving on, the CEO of YouTube now, Neil Mohan, has said if you want to grow your YouTube audience, subtitles and captions are key. The more accessible your videos are, the more people can enjoy them. Here's a great breakdown on how to add captions in Studio, which, yeah, depending on what kind of content you're making, adding captions may be doable, but for video game long players or even Let's Players that are doing a lot of editing, adding captions is gonna probably not be worth the effort. You get a decent level of quality of auto subtitles in YouTube videos anyways. And yeah, that's about the only thing I think he has said recently that I feel like really matters. I guess YouTube does deserve a slight bit of applause in that they haven't done anything too controversial lately as far as YouTube themselves. Google and their employees maybe are doing some things controversial, but YouTube itself has kind of settled down and stayed steady for the past 3 or 4 months. We didn't have, at least yet, any kind of adpocalypse. We haven't had any major controversies that I've noticed. They almost certainly are winding up for some heavy level of curation / censorship when the US elections start to get even more into full swing. And so they probably are just trying to build up capital and not cause any controversies until they start pulling down videos and censoring videos like crazy based on politics. But yeah, if the best you can do with an unruly child such as YouTube, which is how I would describe it, the company, sometimes the best you can do is just recognize that they haven't broken anything lately, and so we should applaud that, even though that is the bare minimum expectation. Moving on, Skybound has tapped some former Activision execs to lead the marketing efforts. I think this is probably the same story we've talked about before. The Activision Blizzard Vice President of Marketing, Caleb Ruel. Skybound is in danger of becoming the next THQ Nordic Embracer Group if they're not careful. On the other hand, it may very well be a case where Skybound is much closer to becoming the next Telltale game company also. Either way, I can't suspect that there's a high chance Skybound will become the next good video game company, because so far they've put out very little, and it seems like they're just always preparing for the next thing and trying to kickstart things or trying to hire people and get big names to hire more people. Take notice, we never see from mainstream video game journalists an announcement of a brand new company of brand new game programmers who have never worked on a game or worked in the industry before. Like, those kinds of companies probably don't know how to send out a press release, but even if you did, they probably wouldn't get coverage if they sent out the press release by most mainstream video game journalist sites. But there is certainly an equal chance that a brand new company with brand new people to the game industry would make a great game as much as an established company with established people in the industry being able to work together and succeed to make a great game. Skybound is slightly different in that you have it being an established comic book rights holder owning some IP in Invincible and The Walking Dead and still not really being able to monetize that. would make a lot more sense if there was a Disney games division or a Marvel games division or a DC games division that was monetizing their characters a lot better. Of course, we just saw major failures with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League trying to do just that, and Marvel's last game would have probably been Spider-Man 2, and so major success there. So it's a mixed bag of success. It is kind of crazy though that you don't have Mickey Mouse games coming out as often as they should. You really should have like a Mickey Mouse game coming out once a year at minimum. But yeah, we don't see that at all. You could really just go through every single Disney movie and evaluate whether there's room to make a new video game based on that, a new mobile game, cell phone game, or just a console game. But Disney is not really focused on that. Let's see. So Steam was suddenly banned in Vietnam. Now I'm almost 100% sure this is the Vietnamese government that banned Steam, all of Steam. But nobody really seems to know why at all. There is some speculation here that the Vietnamese, I can't pronounce that, can I? There's some speculation that the government of Vietnam is falling in line with the Chinese government, perhaps taking steps to prepare for it being swallowed whole by China. Certainly China is making it pretty obvious that they plan to take over basically any country that they border, and then often I think they may straight up just start ethnic cleansing the people in those countries to heavy amounts. There might be some other reason for it. On top of Steam being completely banned in Vietnam, it is also worth mentioning that there's still a significant number of countries that are not available for that you cannot buy Helldivers on as far as Steam. So that change has not been undone. Let's see. There's a translated story from Vietnam Net. The ban may be connected to domestic publishers. A representative from one domestic publisher claims Steam can put games out in the country without having to seek permission from local government like Vietnamese developers have to. According to them, Valve alleges ability to break the rules is an injustice to domestic publishers. Authorities have to take management measures with this cross-border platform, otherwise domestic game publishers will die. So there is a translated statement here that seems to imply the domestic publishers in Vietnam, which I can't imagine there's more than a few, may have pushed for an outright ban, because it seems like Vietnam may be making the argument that they should have a say in whether games are published on Steam in other parts of the world too. And Steam cannot kowtow to that kind of authoritarianism by any means, by any country. If all of a sudden the any country, China, Russia, whoever, has a say as to whether a game can be for sale and purchased in the United States, that violates the sovereignty of the United States. It violates the rights of the United States citizens and their freedom of speech from their constitution. So yeah, Steam cannot really follow that. And definitely Steam, I think, can afford to lose Vietnam as a country. The Vietnamese people will have to push and investigate what's going on. And I imagine this is one of those cases where it might just be underreported, and it may just be one government agency making a single decision without asking for any kind of democratic authority or vote around it. Now, moving on to the next story, Devolver Digital was doing some kind of weird giveaway. Also, I'm not sure this is a real convention, the Ludo Narrative Con, or if this isn't really basically just a sale. And frankly, the phrase Ludo Narrative Dissonance is too complex a phrase to really follow or care about, and it has been overused, and too many games claim that they are not creating a Ludo narrative dissonance when there's really not a lot of evidence to back up those claims. Yeah. A Ludo Narracon compared to a Shooter Con would be very different conventions. Shooter Con would just be shooter games, where a Ludo Narrative Con would be just any kind of game that is going to have some kind of story in it, probably a heavy number of visual novels in particular. Okay, so Devolver Digital says it's almost a 15th birthday, so they're giving away this Volvi prize pack and something called a Steam Deck. To enter, you have to post a video of yourself sharing a memorable Devolver gaming moment with hashtag Devolver15th by May 12th. The games may go into a birthday message, so please be fully presentable. Volvi is this fake mascot that Devolver Digital is pretending existed the whole time, when Devolver Digital has been making games for 15 years. Now they say a Steam Deck, and it looks like they just put a piece of paper over the screen that says Devolver Digital 15th anniversary. But I can tell you that the white outline here on the control sticks indicates that this is actually a LCD version of the Steam Deck, not the OLED version. Looks like it has a dock with it, so you're probably getting somebody's old Steam Deck in that case. And to do that, they are basically asking you to work for free and make a video for them. But if you're desperate for a Steam Deck, it is a possibility, so I will highlight that. And frankly, not that many people are gonna enter at this rate, because then they didn't give you enough time in advance to really do it. So something cheap and easy is probably going to win. One would assume that you're going to be randomly selected from all the entrants. Yeah, apparently they're giving away 3 prize packs. One for the North America, one for the UK, and one for the European Union. And they say it is a Steam Deck OLED, so the picture they took is wrong, the wrong unit. That is slightly better prize. Moving on, the Jurassic World Evolution studio Frontier has announced plans to make a 3rd entry. The first 2 park management games were released in 2018 and 2021. So probably always room for Jurassic World or Jurassic Park simulation games. They are a niche game, but they, I imagine, have a big enough audience to justify making another one every few years. Although I would think that was true for a lot of games, and it still doesn't happen. Warner Brothers CEO says he was disappointed, was quote unquote disappointing, that the Suicide Squad release overshadowed the studio's financials. Which, yeah. This may be finally the point where we start to see Warner Brothers, now owned by AT&T, start to pivot and start to do different things. Maybe not exclusively around video games, though, because they also announced what the costume was going to look like for the next Superman movie, and so there's talk about that. I'm not sure if it's good talk or bad talk, really, but I know there's talk about it. And yeah, I could see Warner Brothers still just focusing a lot on movies, CW TV show, TV channel, comic books from DC, and not really having a major focus around comic book or Warner Brothers games. And yeah, it might also be a case that AT&T just doesn't care, and so Warner Brothers has been given a blank check to do whatever they want. It is a valid question, certainly, to ask as far as what is the next thing you should do with what is the next thing you should do with the DC universe as far as video games. We know they've announced a VR Batman game, but probably the move is to make a new Batman game. Try something different with Batman a little bit. Don't just make it more Arkham City, Arkham Asylum. Don't make it in the Arkham universe. But also, you can't probably go silly with it and do a Batman 86 game. So I probably would expect less open world, more linear narrative experience with Batman. Tell a full arc of a Batman comic series that went 2 or 3 years. I think that would work pretty well there. And honestly, if it weren't for the fact that DC Comics doesn't want you to remember their previous runs of comics, DC video games and comic book video games should just trail the release of comics by a year or two. But that probably wouldn't happen. But they certainly could trail release of comics by 10 years. You could certainly find some good stories that go from the beginning to the end as far as Batman. Realistically, I would assume that might be Dark Knight's Batman Dark Knights, or Dark Knight's Metal, the Bat Who Laughs and all of that. That would be something that most people aren't aware of as far as a event that happened in DC Comics relatively recently. If you made a video game based on that, it would just feel like you're making a video game that includes Batman in a very weird, different kind of scenario. The other thing you could try to experiment with is make a Superman game. If you can make an Invincible game, you can make a Superman game, so that you should at least try. Obviously, a Superman game probably should just be a narrative type experience, less and not a beat 'em up type experience. And then if you did want to make an open world game, I would say make a Flash game starring the Flash, or a Justice League game that stars the non-Trinity characters overall. I really would like to see Warner Brothers just throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. But we're not seeing that. And with these bad financials, it may very well be the case that Warner Brothers just decides to do less and less. Which, yeah, that's fine. There's some craziness around Warner Brothers though, that they kind of can't do that. Because I would definitely fire somebody that made that suggestion if I was the president of Warner Brothers. Because you've got the Harry Potter movie remakes with new actors. There should be all kinds of Harry Potter games in development starring those kid actors, and the appearance of those kid actors. You've got the DC movies and DC comics that need to constantly have video games around that. They've just announced that they're going to make more Lord of the Rings movies, so it would make more sense to have video games based on Lord of the Rings also. So Warner Brothers really should have a lot on its plate as far as what's in development right now, and I'm not certain it really does. Now, this is a little surprising. Xbox's Sea of Thieves was the best-selling digital PS5 game in Europe last month, according to Video Games Chronicle. There feels like there are just some games that I have a mental block to, or just I cannot hear any positivity around them because of, I guess, my own cognitive biases. Or very possibly there are some games that, despite seeming to have good sales, just are immune to getting good press. And Sea of Thieves might be a great example of that, because Xbox has been singing the praises of Sea of Thieves for years. Feels like probably a decade at this point, and yet I still can't keep Sea of Thieves straight in my head compared to the Ubisoft Pirates game, which did terribly, and I still can't think that Sea of Thieves is much better than the terrible Ubisoft Pirate game. A big part of this certainly is that Sea of Thieves is a cooperative multiplayer game, and so it is definitely not the kind of game I would ever play anyways. A PlayStation 1 inspired horror game called Crow Country is now available. And yeah, looking at these graphics, that does look like a PS1 game, and it being a horror game definitely seems like that's a weirder type of game to make. But you can see it's fairly inspired by something like Resident Evil 1. Now the problem I would see here is the same problem I have whenever I see some Game Boy inspired game. Is these PlayStation 1 graphics don't lead me towards any kind of sentimentality as much as it just looks like they failed to make good looking graphics. Early 3D polygonal games just don't look interesting to me, and they don't look good to me in the same way that black and white 240 by 240 resolution Game Boy games don't look interesting to me. Yeah, I'm not saying every game needs to be hyper realistic 3D modern styles, but I do want things to be high resolution. I do want things to be anti-aliased and not jaggy on the edges. I do want things to be of a certain level of color palettes and look like a video game that took some effort to make. Yeah. There's definitely a case where I would have seen this game on Steam and just dismissed it immediately as some kind of low effort horror game, way worse than the extremely well polished low effort horror games that flood Steam. This is also notably the an indie game made by the studio behind Snipper Clips on Switch, which to me makes me think that this team has very poor animation skills, because Snipper Clips was just a 2D kind of simplistic animation style. So maybe by their third or fourth game they will have learned how to 3D model things by a modern standard. But yeah, this might also be a game that people give a chance to though, and gets very high reviews. So I would put it on my fall list at least and wait. So here's that story I talked about earlier, where the Xbox studio boss says it needs smaller, award-winning games one day after closing Tango Gameworks. I feel like closing Tango Gameworks very possibly was closed for a different reason than the other 3 studios were closed, just because Shinji Mikami no longer worked there. But there is also an argument to be made that the budget and the team for Hi-Fi Rush was bigger than what he means when he says smaller, and award-winning games is probably a terrible requirement to state out loud, because almost any game can win awards. Like, it's very, very easy to pay for awards. Just do a small, cheap for your consideration campaign and you can win most of them. Win 4 or 5 awards, even if your game was absolutely garbage. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't use award winning as a metric. The better thing here, he should have probably been more honest and said it needs extremely low budget, high revenue games, because that's really what he wants. Is he wants games that cost very little to make, that sell for as much money as possible. So that would be adjusted revenue that you are looking for. Now, also, it's probably worth questioning whether, if Tango Gameworks was in that kind of consideration, which probably wasn't, are they being held to an unfair standard? Because I'm pretty sure Hi-Fi Rush was given away for free to everybody who owned Game Pass. And overall, I think there probably is some uncertainty as far as whether Xbox is still 100% behind the idea of Game Pass and just growing the number of subscribers in Game Pass, or whether they are thinking about going in a different direction. I know the employees are discussing whether they should do things differently at Microsoft, as from what I've heard. But the question is Phil Spencer thinking about changing it? Changing what Microsoft and Xbox in particular are focused on? Let's see, and then we already talked about Nintendo ending X Twitter support. Sony and Microsoft did it last year. And then we have the Famitsu sales numbers from Komatsu, and this gives me one last opportunity, I imagine. I said this the last time we talked about Stellar Blade, but I imagine this week, maybe next week, maybe the week after that, on the sales numbers, I'll still be able to see what the sales are on Stellar Blade, in Japan at least. I imagine the numbers will be fairly high. They said it opened at 67,131 units sold at retail. Which I imagine video games are only sold at retail and not sold in bulk anywhere else. But I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers just trend downward after that. So we have here for PlayStation 5 taking the #1 spot, Stellar Blade in Japan. And then you have Eiyuden Chronicle and Endless Ocean being 2 new games for Nintendo Switch. And then Mario Kart 8, then Eiyuden Chronicle for the PS5. In the 5th spot, then Saga Emerald Beyond for the Switch, then Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai sweep the board in the 7th spot. So it was a pretty big week in general just for new games in Japan overall. And weirdly, Minecraft is like in the 10th spot. So the overall software sales numbers, 67,000 is 20,000 more than Eiyuden Chronicle for the Nintendo Switch in the number 2 spot. But it feels like there should be some kind of update here where these numbers overall should be higher. Mario Kart 8 has sold in its lifetime 5 million copies. And yeah, once you start to compare these new games that outsold this one week to like Mario Brothers Wonder, which has sold 1.8 million copies, or Minecraft that sold 3.5 million for the Switch. Hardware sales for the Switch OLED model are still high. We finally are not seeing the Nintendo DS XL being mentioned. PlayStation 4 numbers are really low. Xbox Series X numbers relatively high, but still not really competing compared to Switch numbers or PS5 numbers. Which PS5 numbers are not really competing compared to the 3 different models of the Switch. And I really have no reason to believe that when the Switch Model 2 gets released, the sales numbers in Japan are going to change drastically. If Steam Decks were listed on here and then we started to see actual numbers for the Steam Decks in Japan, that might be somewhat revealing. But yeah, if they just start mentioning a Switch 2, it'll just be numbers that are going to be higher than Xbox or PlayStation's, more than likely. Unless there was just something about the Switch 2 that fans inherently rejected. Price being too high, it having bad marketing, bad game support, always on requirements, something crazy like that. Let's see. Prytania Media has continued the shutdown process with Day One Entertainment closure. The Day One shuttering marks the 3rd studio closure in 3 months by Prytania. These are not companies I recognize. I suspect they might be Indian companies based on the names. But yeah, it's worth mentioning there's still shutdowns, still layoffs, although it seems like it's happening slightly less frequently in the past couple of weeks. We still are seeing a lot of that happen. And then Capcom, we talked about this, announces its 7th consecutive year of record results, which financially might be a little fishy, but it's somewhat believable with Capcom. It's pretty believable that they have just every year over year had record results. But yeah, most companies cannot do that, and usually if you're going to have that happen, it's because the company is underreporting their revenue in previous years to reach that result. And that feels like a somewhat Japanese thing where you would not dare shame the company by announcing poor financials, so instead you would just manipulate the books, cook the books, so that it always looks like you're being profitable. That was, I think, one of the things about like Bernie Madoff is that he was doing something fishy, basically a pyramid scheme, and he was cooking the books so he looked like he was always financially successful every quarter for years and years and years, and that became a red flag to people, some people, not a lot of people, but some people, in that it was too good to be true. 7 years of full success seems too good to be true for Capcom. Now my macro kind of messed up again, and I'm not sure what happened. I was actually watching my macro, and there's a point where it just kind of speeds up, and I need my macros to run faster to save time, obviously, but once it sped up, I really couldn't even follow what it was doing. So we may run into a thing as we go through all the new games on Steam, in that I may end up jumping around in the tabs a little bit more. Here we have a Steamboat Willie garbage game. So far, Winnie the Pooh and Steamboat Willie going into public domain has not led to anything interesting happening with it at all. It would make a lot more sense with Steamboat Willie going into public domain for animation studios not affiliated with Disney to make an anthology of Steamboat Willie type animations and put it out, maybe even in theaters. Noticeably too, I'd also have to say Porky Pig, to my knowledge, is not in public domain, nor is Daisy, because I don't believe she was in the Steamboat Willie cartoons either. So even if you were going to claim public domain, you're probably still infringing on these characters if they're copyrightable at all. They seem, by modern standards, pretty generic. A pig in a shirt seems pretty generic for a cartoon, or a mouse in a skirt and a daisy hat seems somewhat generic. Let's see. The Purge Club sounds like a group of bulimics. So here we have a visual novel game, which I might as well make YouTube shorts on them, I guess. I'm still trying to recover from changing the title of my live streams to get back to the number of views I was getting before. It does seem like I am going to bounce back fairly quickly, but yeah, I'm hoping I didn't just kill all momentum. Regardless, it kind of happened. It had to happen. Sometimes you just have to amputate, or as part of surgery, as part of healing. And having Yu-Gi-Oh! In the title was the thing that had become pretty obvious needed to be amputated from these live streams. The harder decision will be to actually amputate Yu-Gi-Oh! As the game. Brocula. Interesting idea. Problem here is it's mostly negative. I just don't feel like I want to promote things that have managed to get such negative reviews. Of course, at some point there might just be a trend where people are intentionally review bombing new games. Like, if you got every single developer or publisher on Steam to just like buy and review bomb new games to promote their old games, you could see something like that happening. And it wouldn't have to be every single publisher. Even if you got 20 or 30 publishers doing that consistently, then you might see every single new game getting heavily negatively reviewed. This is a programming game, so I'm going to give it a chance. But yeah. Here we have a free chess. Is it actually free? Not really, because there's $6 of DLC here. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a chess game where you can just pick up the pieces and move them around, but it doesn't enforce any rules as far as where you can move the pieces and or how you can play. So I'm going to say no to that. I assume the Bridge Curse 2 is now out, demonstrated very positively. Yeah. This looks like it's all over the place. There's a beat 'em up game. Texas Border Guard. Looks like an asset flip first person shooter. Here's another chess thing. You still are in this situation where I wouldn't really recommend anybody play chess on Steam unless you were going to use Tabletop Simulator to do it for the community aspects. But even in that case, I think you're better off with playing on chess.com. And yeah, important to point out too, there very possibly is a different website to play chess on that's even better than chess.com that I'm just unaware of. But particularly in the case of Steam, I just haven't seen anything that feels like it should be better than Tabletop Simulator. Here is the overwhelmingly positive reviewed game Animal Well. Remember, this is Video Game Donkey's company Big Mode making this game and publishing this game. We've seen like Game Grumps publish 2 or 3 games in a similar way, and they definitely get a bump by having popular YouTubers promote the games or be affiliated with the games. But I suspect that Animal Well is actually a good game in itself, and so this may have been a case where somebody made a good game, showed it to Video Game Donkey, and Video Game Donkey decided to be the publisher of it. That makes some weird financial implications certainly too, and it makes some weird review implications where Video Game Donkey will be suspect if he ever did review Animal Well in any way, even though he's mostly comedic about how he quote-unquote reviews games. Tree growing strategy game looks like it's probably a cell phone game. It doesn't look quite good enough to say yes to. I'm in a very weird position where I would like to do something more effective over the weekend, but I probably won't. The only thing that could possibly happen is I would finish Fallout 76. Otherwise, I am just needing to continue to play Fallout 76. Even if I do finish Fallout 76, I really need to schedule more videos after the fact, or even in between that. I definitely have some times where I wish I could just clone myself, you know, Naruto Shadow Jutsu style. Just make a clone of yourself to do twice as much work in the same amount of time. But I'm not sure I would even accomplish more work if there was 2 of me around. Just often would probably be 2 copies of the same tired person. falling asleep. There definitely was a day this week where I just fell asleep. And, you know, I'm doing a lot of extra non-YouTube stuff for the past month or so, and that is draining me of energy more and more. I definitely can feel it. And yeah, I definitely don't feel like I'm as high energy as I should be today. I can only really blame that on being overstuffed on Meat Lover's Pizza. Yeah. What's funny about that is I ordered a medium pizza thinking, oh, I wasn't very hungry, and I ate less than half of even a medium. This game I think is in Spanish only. Yeah, seems like we're kind of back to seeing some higher numbers of garbage games on Steam. I thought perhaps they were holding back the release of games to save up for a spring sale, but I feel like that wasn't really the reason. It may have just been somebody was sick one day to approve the games. Here's a game that I don't believe any of the screenshots, but it is rated very positively, so I'm gonna make a YouTube short on it. It is an MMO anyway, so I'm not gonna put it on the follow list. Mostly I think I want to see if that turns into anything as far as getting more views on the YouTube shorts. I have no idea really how the suggestion algorithm really works for YouTube shorts. I'm not sure it actually works at all. It may be about as close to random as you would ever imagine. Here we have another RPG Maker game that is tagged as having sexual content and nudity, and yet it's not in the adult section. So we're continuing to have that kind of shenanigans happening. I mean, that's really easy to fix too. Any games with these tags placed by the publisher or developer should just by default have to be in the adult section, or they can't use the tags. Should just be that easy. 2-3 lines of code at most, and yet it hasn't happened. And maybe you would have some kind of dispute system if you really needed those tags but needed to be outside the adult section. But I imagine most people wouldn't even bother to dispute that. There's a lot of games today also, overall. A lot of games getting released at the same time, weirdly. This is too much dark screenshot syndrome. High School of the Dead, Anime Girls High School of the Dead. So they straight up are just taking the title of an anime series to make their low effort zombie shooter asset flip game. I guess it's probably so far the right move that Valve should not be announcing some kind of AI system that would look at screenshots and describe them. You probably could make some level of success there by just having every screenshot submitted be run through a what you would call AI, but really probably isn't AI, some kind of item detection program to tell you what is in those pictures. And really, the human detection, should have probably made a short on that one. Human detection is the real thing you want. Are you showing me a human in this screenshot? Then let a human take a second glance at it. Are you showing me blood? Are you showing me violence? Are you showing me nudity in the screenshots? Even without anything complicated to detect the screenshots, you could also just scan the tags, scan the words in the description. Another one of these low effort flying games under the Airy series, which clearly somebody is probably buying those, although maybe not. It may just be some kind of weird money laundering scheme. Same is possibly true with the I commissioned some series. Now noticeably today we have not seen a single great looking game. It is just a lot of garbage. But in fairness, it also has been probably months, if not over a year, since the last time I saw something that really catch my attention and looked like it was new or revolutionary or even interesting. Like this crime simulator game is probably too much, because then you're just making a GTA clone that would fail in comparison to GTA. Thief Simulator makes sense because you're limiting yourself down to just being a thief. Looks like this is a visual novel, basically. Give that a chance. Here is that game Marathon. So let's go ahead and add that to my library while we're at it. Which means I don't need to put it on the follow list. So this shows us what Marathon is, at least. There's supposed to be a couple other Marathon games, but I didn't see them. You would have thought they would have been right next to each other. I'll give that a chance. Peter Schwartz. Looks like an old NES game. I guess I'll give that a chance. I really don't want to. As it's taking longer and longer for me to finish Fallout New Vegas, I definitely don't feel like I would move into playing another Fallout game or Metro game. It's just too much in one row. One thing certainly to mention too is that the cover character is in a special kind of Fallout New Vegas power armor, and has their mask, their face covered in the mask. And in the banner art in Fallout New Vegas, you see this character, and that is supposed to be the character that you custom generate and play as throughout the game, I assume. but you just don't see anybody in that armor or see that armor at all for hours and hours and hours. It would make a lot more sense if you saw somebody in that armor at the very beginning of the game. Like the whole first hour of Fallout New Vegas, I think, needs to be redone. You need to have some actual nudity shown, since you're going to see nudity 20 plus hours into the game when you reach the strip, or semi-nudity, toplessness with pasties effectively. So that needs to be shown at the first hour so players can decide whether they want that or not. Frankly, there could have been a pop-up that enabled that or disabled that too. We're not done yet. But yeah, there should be a decent amount of cussing also at the first hour, because there is quite a lot of cussing in Fallout New Vegas. Too much for my taste, really. But you need to let the player know what they're going to see and what's going to happen. And you need to see somebody in that power armor show up and possibly save the day. Or just see them in the distance. Something like that. I would also say overall there's some major imbalance problems in New Vegas, in that there's a lot of open areas in the wastelands where there are no enemies attacking you, despite the fact that they have programmed in the game rad roaches and rats. So you should every minute or so see a rat or a rad roach, something that you could shoot at, something that would just give you reasons to use your bullets. A lot of the systems, like bullets in the game, are broken and don't make sense at all. But yeah, there's a lot of slowness when you're out in the open world, but you would expect it to come into conflict quite a bit. Then it's fairly slow when you're inside of dungeons also. And then when you get inside of buildings, it's extremely slow, because then you have conversations trees that require you to just talk to people for way too long. Yep. I do feel like I know I only played a small portion of like Gears of War 3, but I feel like Gears of War games are a much better modern take on what a Fallout game should be. Just constantly shooting, constantly getting into firefights, more of a linear experience. You don't need open world really. But I'm in danger of repeating myself, so let's just move on. Also, this is going to be a long stream if I'm not careful. So we've got the 24-hour peak of games on SteamDB. You can see Helldivers is in the 10th spot, Fallout 4 is in the 11th spot. So I would suspect things are still pretty much the same as they were on Wednesday. Yeah. And I've started to scroll down a lot lower instead of just looking at the top 20 games on the list. I think that's in part because my chart is not really helping me. Apex Legends back up to a peak. Fallout 4, hard to see where it is. I ran out of colors, so now Fallout 4 is a light blue. And I think there might be something weird happening on this chart now, where it didn't get rid of 916, but the next data point that is being marked here, I think, is 920 or 921. I think the dots are still being shown for every single day, but the label has squeezed itself enough to say they're going to get rid of 2 or 3 of the date labels, which implies to me that Google Sheets has just a way to make charts scale no matter how much data points you throw at it, which that's applaudable. If I just cleaned up my data points where there was some bad days of bad information, all these dots should be connecting to each other and they aren't. Now, for Steam, we have a Paradox Publisher Sale free weekend, 80% off. If any of these games look like they would interest you, I'm gonna just ignore that. And then top selling Hades 2, Dark Souls 3, Destiny 2, Helldivers 2. Should hover over Helldivers 2 just to see where they are in reviews. It's not gonna pop up, is it? Nope, unfortunate. Then the Ludonaricon. Should probably look at that. Let's see. Third party sales. This one looks like it is actually going to have live streams though. So it's not just a publisher sale equivalent from multiple publishers. Yep. So these are more indie games, more focused on story, more weird games, perhaps more left-leaning games, or queer-coded games, or LGBTQ plus coded games. I think a lot of them are like that. Another My Lovely game apparently is coming. My Lovely Empress. But yeah, when you look at all these thumbnails of the games, does that lead to any way in which you could personally explain what a ludonarrative dissonance it is, or what that means as a concept? Or is this really just a bunch of smaller, more story-focused games? Is that all they really mean? This is the second sale we've seen that has had a special Steam Deck section, and I would imagine the significant number of these games would play perfectly out of the box on the Steam Deck, because these aren't really going to be super demanding experiences. Yeah, Inscription is an interesting thought as far as a ludonarrative dissonance game. But then even when you look at the art here, what it's called Ludonaricon, you've got some kind of golem here, rock creature golem, a dog with a witch hat, a little witch anime girl in a summoning circle, and then a glowing orb. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything to me as far as ludonarrative dissonance is concerned. See what games are on sale. Honestly, I'm not sure what game would be on sale that would even catch my attention. I did see Dying Light was on sale. Should buy Hades. I used to ask people to gift me games, and at this point it's not even fair to ask that because I'll never get around to actually playing the games. But yeah, that would be one way people could support me, is friending me on Steam and gifting me games, just so I have a bigger collection of games when I do get around to playing them. Let's see. New and trending is not top sellers. Homeworld 3 top seller. And popular upcoming would be the weirder list. I wonder how much coverage Braid Anniversary Edition is going to get. I know that the maker of this game on his YouTube channel is putting up kind of long documentaries around the making of Braid originally. But I also kind of wonder if Braid was just overhyped. Let's see, we wanted to see what the positivity rating was on Helldivers. It's 75% now. Yep. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets bumped up to even 80% before everything is said and done, and it settles into a more natural rating after all the controversy. Okay, let's do headlines and then we'll be done for today. Bungie Marathon Trilogy is coming to Steam. The first game is free now. The studio is currently working on a new Marathon game for PC and consoles. So that is what Bungie is doing. In part. I'd assume also of making Destiny 2. A new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom merchandise has been announced, including an official soundtrack, which seems like it includes quite a few discs. This is probably a collector's edition that's too expensive, but it doesn't look terrible for what it's offering. Although usually you get more than just maybe an art book and a model and a soundtrack. The Rogue Prince of Persia has been delayed because of Hades 2 release. Fallout 4 was April's best-selling game in the UK. God of War Ragnarok will reportedly be announced for PC imminently. The next free Epic Games Store title will be a mystery game. A global release for Persona 5, The Phantom X, is being considered. Microsoft is going to launch a mobile game store in July. Xbox president says studio closures were made to keep business healthy for the long term. Switch 2 tech specs may have been found in customs and shipping data. Xbox's Sea of Thieves was the best-selling digital PS5 game in Europe last month. Netflix launched Next World, a digital theme park on Roblox with games and items. Interesting. I wasn't expecting Netflix to get in bed with Roblox. Yeah, they have like One Piece characters next to that. I don't know if Netflix owns the rights outright to One Piece or not. Probably they don't. The games based on Stranger Things, One Piece, and Rebel Moon. I don't even know what Rebel Moon is. This is, I guess, Stranger Things. And this looks like a Lego minifig more than anything else. And this is One Piece, obviously. Jurassic World Evolution Studio Frontier announces plans to make a third entry. Nvidia acknowledges that Tekken 8 may randomly crash on certain GeForce graphic cards. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night update adds free Chaos and Versus modes. Sega announces a 32-player mobile game called Sonic Rumble. Warner Brothers says it's disappointing that Suicide Squad's release overshadowed the overall studio's financials. Nintendo is ending X/Twitter support for the Nintendo Switch. Xbox Studios boss says it needs smaller award-winning games one day after closing Tango Gameworks. Capcom announces the 7th consecutive year of record results. Arcane Austin was reportedly pitching an immersive sim before its closure. A PlayStation 1 inspired horror game called Crow Country is now available. Okay. So, kind of backwards today as far as the Matsu articles. Let's just do it this order, and this will be an interesting experiment. We'll go through the GameDeveloper.com articles, and then we'll do the Gamatsu articles last because, yeah, my macro's messed up and the tabs are in the wrong place. EA boss thinks ads in AAA games would be meaningful growth driver. Microsoft is launching a web-based mobile game storefront in July. The Xbox president says studio closures will ensure business is healthy for the long term. CI Games sanctions another 30 layoffs in a final targeted round of redundancies. Capcom hits a new record for sales and profits in its 2023-2024 financials. Evil Empire delays the Rogue Prince of Persia's early access to avoid Hades 2. Steam has been suddenly banned in Vietnam. Yellow raises $5 million for generative AI-powered 3D modeling tool, which I assume this is trying to say whatever you generate with Yellow can then be exported to Unity, Unreal, or Roblox. Generally speaking, though, I don't think that's a great looking character to be AI generated. The CWA asked Microsoft, where's the respect and compassion following studio closures? Skybound taps former Activision Blizzard exec to lead marketing efforts. Lightforge Games is laying off the majority of its development team. There's a report that Xbox is bracing for more cuts after studio hoarder Microsoft claims it's spread too thin. Nintendo kills X integration for the Switch in June. Prytania Media continues the shutdown procession with Day One Entertainment closure. Dead Island 2 has shambled to 7 million players in over a year. Alright. We're still not at the end of the show, but we will be there fairly quickly. Eternal Threads for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch launches May 23rd. Let's see what this looks like. Well, that looks really interesting. Like a Dragon new title Minato Girl's Audition applications opened. Appearance as a Minato girl in the latest Like a Dragon game. So they are asking for amateurs or professional female cast only to interview to be in the Like a Dragon games. Sounds like a casting couch to me, but wouldn't be surprised if that's just how it's done in Japan a lot of times. Whether there's an actual casting couch or any impropriety otherwise happening. The Rogue Prince of Persia early access delayed to later in May. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai Sweep the Board is coming to the PS4 and 5, the Xbox One and Series, and PC on July 17th. No Steam link for this. Sega is considering a Persona 5 The Phantom X expansion in Japan and worldwide. I think this is the same story. It's currently available in Chinese and Korean. Cotton Reboot High Tension announced for the PS4 and 5 and Switch. This would be the sequel to the Cotton Reboot. I suppose. Which is probably a sequel to this game, maybe not. Fitness boxing featuring Hatsune Miku is coming to Asia in English on July 12th. I question though if this will come ever to the West. You would probably just have to import it. And inherently, if you had like a 10-year-old kid, I'm not sure you want them to see the belly of Hatsune Miku in a fitness boxing outfit that whole time. Although maybe that would motivate your 10-year-old kid to box and exercise, so it might be for the better good. You know, that is an interesting thing to think about. There were many, many years, probably a decade or two, where parents were accusing their children of getting fat and lazy, sitting in front of the TV and playing video games all the time. At this point, I don't think we're hearing those same kind of claims. There's just better parenting, I think, going on in general to have kids exercise more and maintain their health better. And it may also be a case where the parents of today were the kids that were being accused of becoming fat and lazy watching TV and playing video games all the time, and they're not willing to repeat those same claims with their children. In fairness, before the Wii, there really were very few instances where you could play a video game and move and exercise. And even now with the Switch, there's very little movement happening. I think overall, people in the West probably just have more sedentary lives anyway, so it is pretty normal to sit in front of TVs and not exhaust energy working fields or working strenuous labor jobs. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance complete guide video, new demons, new dungeon, and systems have been detailed on Gematsu. There's probably a very long collection here of demons and monsters that they would show, and just screenshots in general. For the large variety of monsters and demons in the Shin Megami Tensei series, I question if you aren't fighting these enemies maybe once or twice in the entire game. POED Definitive Edition launches May 16th. This is a remastered first-person shooter. It is available on Steam. I'm pretty sure I've already made a YouTube short for it, though I don't think I want to make another. Stray Gods, the role-playing musical DLC Orpheus has been announced. Which, that is a game that I have completely missed. And funnily enough, you can't follow the DLC. What I will do though is put this on my wish list, take it off the follow list, and I will click the back button to the DLC and see if I can make a YouTube short on the DLC. I'm still not 100% sure that works, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Frontier Development announces a third Japanese Jurassic World game. Not Japanese World. Although, I don't know what kind of game that would be. A supernatural life simulation game, Moonlight Peaks, is going to be published by Exceed Games in Marvelous Europe. I think this is the first I've heard of this. Yep. Screenshot's not really showing me quite enough. Doesn't look too special from those screenshots. Reynatus launches September 27th in the West. Just a couple more. Famitsu sales 422 through 5.5, update number 2. I think we may very well get an update number 3 here. No. Update number 2 seems to have all of the top 30 games. Which seems like the games overall maybe shifted spaces with the updates. Stellar Blade making the second spot, weirdly, not the first spot after the updates. Reynatus Neo The World Ends With You collaboration trailer is available on Gematsu. Master Detective Archives Raincoat Plus launches October 1st in the West. It's kind of premature, I guess, to try and make a YouTube short on a game that's all still in Japanese. And that is going to actually be the end of the show now. That's it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.